In Egypt, a court has sentenced nearly 200 supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood to the death penalty. That is including its leader, Mohammed Badie. The decision comes 2 months after a trial where hundreds faced charges for an attack on a police station last year. The trial that was widely criticized by human rights groups who say the roundup was politically motivated. The case is probably headed to Egypt's appeal courts. Amnesty International is one of the groups that has condemned the move. Nicholas Piachaud is an Egyptian researcher with Amnesty International, Egypt Researcher. He joins me now from London, England, via Skype. Thanks for joining us, Nicholas. What was your reaction, first of all, when you heard about the decision to uphold the death sentences?
Well, this wasn't a fair trial. This looks like a purge of the political opposition. You know, one of the 180 people sentenced to death today was the head of the Muslim Brotherhood, and it follows hot on the heels of a decision by a court earlier this week sentencing almost the entire leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood to death. You know, this is a deeply disappointing decision, and it looks like the death penalty is now being used as a tool to wipe out dissent and the political opposition. It looks like the judiciary is trying to finish in the courts what the security forces began in the streets.
As you alluded to, the judge in the case, the same judge who originally sentenced 683 people to death back in April. What do you think is the motivation behind his rulings, or is it just that, as you're saying, finishing what couldn't happen on the streets?
Well, I think it's a sign that Egypt's criminal justice system is spiraling rapidly out of control. And I think after today, really, that the credibility of Egypt's judiciary lies in tatters. Our trial observer documented a litany of fair trial violations. One of the dozens of people sentenced to death was functionally blind and clearly couldn't have taken part in any of the political violence of which he was accused. I think many people will be wondering at the scale of the injustice done today.
What about legal representation as well? Are they getting any, and is it good enough?
Well, no. I mean, as I said, there was a litany of fair trial violations, and many of these people were not in the court today to hear the verdict. Some lawyers were also not allowed in the court to hear the verdict. I think it's worth noting that in one of the previous trial sessions, in another case, the judge actually ordered armed police to surround defense lawyers and train their guns on them after they protested the way the trial was going and the lack of fairness.
So what message is the Egyptian government, do you think, trying to send here?
Well, I think the message is very clear. They're going to wipe out the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think there's a real risk that these men may now face the noose. That's because in the last week we've seen a spike in executions, with I think 7 executions reported in the last week. Those are the first since the last reported execution, which I believe was in October 2011. We're seeing Egypt returning to the death penalty and using it in an unprecedented way to purge the political opposition.
I want to talk now about what you at Amnesty are doing. Amnesty calling for the release of hundreds of people arrested without charge who could face further persecution. That includes a Canadian journalist, Mohammed Badie, but we have not heard much pressure from foreign governments on that end. What do you think? Why do you think that is?
Well, it's time for the international community to wake up and see what's happening in Egypt. We've had knee-jerk condemnations, but what's needed really is a vision for engaging with the Egyptian authorities and holding them to account for the gross human rights violations we've seen over the last year. You know, the truth is what's happened is the courts are locking up government critics and handing out mass death sentences while letting security forces, you know, get away with murder. Not one member of the police is now behind bars for the violations we've seen over the last year. You know, the truth is the international community likes to talk about reconciliation between Egypt's political factions. It's hard to see how that's going to happen when the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood is now condemned to death.
This is an important discussion. I'm glad we were able to track you down today for this. Thanks so much for your insights. Nicholas Piachaud, an Egypt researcher with Amnesty International, speaking with us from London.